Ice cream cones, coin shortages, tension with the central government. We're going to cover a lot on Coffee Talk today. So let's get started. Tension between the central government and local governments dates back to the beginning of American history. And we're seeing that theme surface in a couple big stories, one related to the pandemic, the other related to policing. So we'll start with the serious stuff and then end with the ice cream cones because I think we can all use that. Am I right? All right, so let's start a little bit with the pandemic. The president held another news conference yesterday at the White House and again delivered data directly to the American public about COVID-19. This is something unusual, something we haven't necessarily seen in the past, as normally it's the doctors from the COVID-19 task force that have done this. There's a couple things that the president said yesterday that I think are notable, but one of them being that he talked about positivity rates in the nation declining. That means the number of people testing for COVID-19 and testing positive is going down compared to what it's looked like in the past. This may be an early sign of the infection rates moving in the right direction, but it's a very early sign. That can happen while we're also seeing hospitalization rates rise and deaths rise. So it's important to be aware of, but also not necessarily a certainty that it's going to elicit the next positive result. In the meantime, while the president was speaking about the pandemic, we saw some moves by state governors. So again, the different picture between the federal government and local governments. State governors in Ohio, Indiana, and Minnesota all issued mask mandates that are statewide. So this is something that's new that we haven't necessarily seen as often as when you can see it on a local level. So that's notable. You can see that the state governors are worried about where infections are headed in their states. Just a note about the press briefing, and I'll go through a couple things on this, but I just wanted to flag this for you because it's on my mind. We're really in some uncharted territory in this pandemic. It is unprecedented times. And even in journalism, we're being challenged for how exactly we're providing coverage. At Smarter News, I always want you to have access to what the president says, whoever is the president. One of the problems I'm trying to solve in news is that at times we can't even hear what people actually said. There's just so much debate. You get a 20-second clip and then you get a 5-minute debate about what a politician said, and you can't even figure out what exactly they said. So I want you to have direct access to the source always, whoever that is. But when the president speaks, it's important. With the president delivering such data-heavy news conferences, it's putting us in a little bit of an interesting spot because we can't fact check that data in real time, and we can't always provide the context that we want and the opposing point of view that we want in real time as well, because the data is always moving. As we move closer to the campaign, to the election season, it's going to be important that we balance coverage of the president of the United States with his opposing opponent, which is Vice President Joe Biden. And so I just want you to know that we're aware of this. We're working hard to provide the context and perspective that's going to be helpful during this pandemic. And if the president continues to have these news conferences where he's delivering the data that the White House chooses to present to the American public, we will continue to cover it. I just want to make sure that we give it the context so we really understand why these numbers matter and how to look at them in different ways. So I just want you to know we're thinking about it. We're being challenged on it every day, and we're really thinking about it because I want you to have fair, nonpartisan coverage and direct access to all sources. On that, by the way, Vice President Joe Biden and former President Barack Obama held a sit-down interview together, a conversation that's going to be out on social media today as we watch how the Democrats are trying to position themselves as well to have some attention during this time, this pandemic, when it is very heavy on the president and the federal government right now because we're in this historic moment. So we'll watch for any news out of that conversation as we'll have access to it as well. In the meantime, I want to talk to you a little bit about policing and tension between, again, the federal government and local governments. So yesterday, the federal government came out and said that they are going to be sending resources, officers, supplies to key American cities that are struggling with rising violence, including Chicago and Albuquerque. We've seen this before as well in some other areas. That's not necessarily unprecedented. What's unprecedented at this moment is you have local politicians saying they don't want the help. And they're accusing the federal government of politics, saying this is part of a platform to talk about law and order ahead of the election. And we don't want to be part of that. We actually don't need the federal government help. The federal government saying, you need the help. We want to help you. And this is what we would like to do. What's the truth there? We'll see. We'll see what actually happens when these federal resources get to the areas that they're intended to and what the end result is. It's just a story to watch and something to be aware of. We talked a little bit about Portland earlier this week. We saw the mayor of Portland try to join protesters yesterday, and the protesters there in Portland, some of them shouted down the mayor. The mayor apparently also was in a moment where he was tear gassed because there's so much tension between protesters and federal forces in Portland. So again, a story to watch. This tension is happening in a lot of different areas in America right now on a vastly different stories. It's not new to see tension between central governments and local governments, between a mayor and the local people, or the governor and a mayor, or the federal government and the city. We're just seeing it in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different channels. So something to be aware of. Quick note about the pandemic that I just want you to know about. The president did talk about rapid testing and talked about it in relation to nursing home facilities and how the federal government wants that to happen more. I didn't know this, but I learned this yesterday doing some reading with an article in the New England Journal of Medicine that Congress allocated a certain amount of money to try to get enough rapid tests, so test results between 5 and 15 minutes for COVID-19, to test 6 million people every day by the end of the year. That's the goal. And think about that with all this stuff that we're doing. If you could rapid test people all the time and the tests were reliable, something that's really the key to getting us back to work and school, because you could just find out if someone was positive. You know, that sounds idealistic. There's a lot of different factors to it. I just didn't realize that exactly was the goal. 6 million people is a lot of people. So we'll see if we can move in that direction. Okay, 2 final quick things. Coin shortages. Some of you have asked about this. Is there a coin shortage in America? And the short answer is no. The Federal Reserve says it's not a coin shortage that we're seeing in America, although you might see the request for exact change or to not use cash when you're going to the store. It's the slowdown in commerce has led to shortages of coins in certain areas. It doesn't mean that there's less coins in circulation. It means that it's moving around slower and causing supply issues in certain areas. And that's why you're seeing some stores make these requests. So short answer on that, we'll have more on the website for you later. In the meantime, I have to tell you a little bit about ice cream cones. I had no idea there was such a controversy about ice cream cones, and I think you should know about it because maybe you can plan your day and get yourself an ice cream cone and say, this is really about American history. So the birth of the ice cream cone apparently happened on this day in 1904 at a fair. It wasn't a fair like a weekend fair, but a fair that lasted several weeks, I think actually several months. And the way the story goes, although again, we can't fact check it to be sure, a pair of brothers were watching how girls were putting ice cream into like little pastries to try to hold the ice cream so that it wouldn't melt. And they had an idea. They wrapped a pastry around their finger and then put the ice cream on top, and the ice cream cone was born. There you go. And our lives changed forever. So just one story. These brothers, by the way, also claim to have a role in inventing the hamburger. And this is where I get a little bit, does lightning strike twice? I don't know. But this is a fun story. And I thought we could use a little fun as we go into the weekend and maybe a little inspiration for, a snack break that I think we could all probably need. All right, guys, keep your questions and comments coming. We love hearing from you. Thank you so much for your support of Smarter News. And we'll be back with more information on the website today. So always check that out, smarternews.com. Have a great day, guys. I'll talk to you later.